Ellie and Mark had been searching for the perfect house for months. A new start. Away from the city, quiet, affordable, not too far from town. When their real estate agent showed them the Everwood Place property, they couldn't believe their luck. A Victorian house, fully furnished, dirt cheap. There had to be a catch. The agent just smiled. Only thing you might not like is the wallpaper. Bit dated. That was an understatement. The walls were covered in old floral wallpaper, yellowing at the corners, wrinkled like old skin. It ran down every hallway, lined every bedroom, even the ceiling in the nursery. Still, Ellie fell in love with the charm. "We'll just peel it off and repaint," she said. "New skin for a new life." Mark nodded. "As long as there's no mold hiding behind it." They signed the papers that afternoon. The first night, things were quiet. Too quiet. The house made strange sounds. Not the creaks and groans of an old place settling, but soft, scratching, like nails sliding gently behind the walls. Ellie woke in the middle of the night. The hallway light was on. She stepped out of the bedroom, and then stopped. There, in the middle of the hallway, was a small face pressed out from the wallpaper, not quite formed, but unmistakably human. Eyes bulging, mouth open in a silent scream. She blinked. Gone. The wall was flat again. She rubbed her eyes and laughed nervously. "I'm just tired." She didn't tell Mark. The next day, Ellie examined the wall where she saw the face. She pulled up the edge of the wallpaper and found nothing. Just dry plaster. But there was something odd about the way it resisted her fingers, like it didn't want to be removed. Later that evening, while dusting the hallway, she noticed more patterns. Not flowers, not vines, but faces. Hundreds of them. Small, subtle, nearly invisible unless the light hit just right. All embedded into the print. All with the same expression. Trapped. Twisted. Watching. She ran to Mark. "There's something wrong with the wallpaper." He laughed it off. "Babe, it's just your imagination. You always had a thing with textures." But that night, as they lay in bed, Ellie whispered, I think they're looking at me." At 3:11 a.m., Ellie awoke to a strange rustling. She sat up. Mark was still asleep. The wallpaper across from their bed was moving, subtly, like someone was walking behind it. Then, a handprint pushed out from the inside. Fingers splayed, palm pressed flat against the surface. It didn't move, just stayed there, as if waiting. Then it slowly slid upward and vanished. Ellie covered her mouth to keep from screaming. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and scanned the wall. There was nothing, but her camera caught something her eyes couldn't. A tall, thin man standing in the pattern, grinning. She dropped the phone. When she picked it up again, the image was gone. The next morning, Ellie begged Mark to let her tear the wallpaper down. "I don't care what's underneath it, I can't sleep. There's something inside it." Mark was annoyed but agreed. One room, just to prove there's nothing. They started with the guest bedroom. Ellie took the scraper and pulled a large section off the wall. Underneath, the wall was covered in burned handprints, as if someone had pressed against it with smoldering skin. Mark stared in disbelief. "What the hell is this?" Then they heard it, a whisper, right in their ears. "Don't peel me away." The lights flickered. The wallpaper behind them retracted, like a living skin pulling back to reveal dozens of blinking eyes. Then just like that, gone. Mark stumbled back. "We're leaving, right now." But as they turned to run, the hallway closed behind them. The walls weren't made of plaster anymore. They were made of faces, and in the center of everyone was the same smile, the same man, the man in the wallpaper. Mark and Ellie stood frozen, staring at the walls that had just shifted, groaned, and watched them. Mark muttered, "This isn't possible. What the hell is this place?" The walls had returned to normal, almost, but now the air was heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Every room seemed smaller, warmer, closer. They grabbed their bags and ran to the front door, locked. But not just locked. The keyhole was gone. Every exit they checked was the same. The windows, too. The glass had been replaced with something soft, warm, and pulsing. Ellie's voice cracked. "We're not in a house anymore." Mark looked at the wallpaper. The floral patterns were no longer random. They formed a face, tall, stretched, stitched across the entire hallway like a mural. The smile was impossibly wide. The eyes were watching. Ellie remembered the journal, the one in the attic. She'd seen it on the first day and thought it was just old junk. They raced up the stairs, heartbeats matching the distant sound of clock hands ticking from inside the walls. In the attic, they found it. A red, leather-bound book. Dusty. Smelled of rot and paint thinner. She opened it. On the first page, property of Algernon Paik, 1884. Dozens of entries followed, rambling, poetic, but deeply disturbed. Algernon Paik had once been a wallpaper artist, but not just any artist. He believed the spirit of a home lived in its walls, and that he could trap human souls inside designs if painted correctly. He called it permanent residence. He bragged about 10 successful tests, but one entry stood out. "I will create the first living wall, a canvas of souls, layered in ink and terror. They'll scream forever, and no one will hear them, because walls don't talk, right?" The last entry read, "I've saved the final space for myself." Ellie dropped the book. "He's in the wallpaper." Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut. Mark ran to pull it, but something was pressing from the other side. From the corner, the wallpaper began to peel upward by itself, revealing a long black hand reaching out from beneath. Ellie screamed. The hand retreated. A voice whispered from inside the walls, "You came into my house. Now your faces will stay." The attic floor shifted, became sticky, like wet paper. Ellie turned toward the window, but now the wallpaper covered it. Not just decorated it. It replaced the glass. Mark pulled open the journal again and flipped to the back. A drawing of the house. But the floor plan was different. It showed a hidden chamber behind the nursery wall. Mark whispered, "There's a room that doesn't exist on the real layout." They had to get there. They shoved the attic door with their shoulders until it splintered open and sprinted down the stairs. As they passed the hallway, the wallpaper rippled. The faces now looked alive, some crying, some mouthing words, one grinning wider and wider with every step. In the nursery, they tore away a thick sheet of wallpaper. Behind it, a false wall. Mark smashed through it with a chair, and there it was. A small hidden door, painted shut. They pried it open. A narrow staircase descended into darkness, the walls lined with black and white photos, all of missing people. Some looked like they were from the 1800s, others and were from the past decade. Ellie gasped. One of the photos was her, taken from last night as she slept. The caption beneath it, "Pending." They stepped into the hidden chamber, and inside, they found Algernon Paik's final masterpiece, a massive mural stretching wall to wall, dozens of faces, painted in layers, each expression frozen in agony, and in the center, his own, eyes hollow, mouth open. As they stared, Algernon's painted head turned, just slightly. A whisper echoed through the room. "It takes one to leave." The door slammed shut behind them. Ellie clutched the journal as the door to the hidden chamber slammed shut behind them. The air was ice cold now, the kind of cold that clings to your bones and doesn't let go. In the flickering flashlight, the mural of painted souls writhed slightly, like it was breathing. She could see eyes moving, mouths twitching. One of the faces looked just like the man from her dream, except this one was crying. Mark whispered, "We shouldn't be in here." Ellie whispered back, "We already are." And then, the mural spoke, not aloud, inside their heads. A keeper is bound. A visitor must replace. Take the brush. Choose the face. From the center of the room, a table rose up, slowly, as if pulled from the floor by invisible hands. On it, a single old paintbrush, its bristles soaked in deep red, and beneath it, a note in twisted handwriting. One paints, one remains. Mark stepped back. Nope, no way. This is some Saw-level demonic crap. Ellie stared at the brush and realized what the house was saying. To escape. One of them had to become part of the mural. A soul for a soul. They fought the thought. For hours, maybe. Time didn't move here like it should. The flashlight flickered constantly, like the shadows were draining it, and each time they turned their backs to the mural, it changed. New faces appeared. One of them now resembled Mark's younger brother, who had gone missing 5 years ago. Mark stared in horror. No, that's not real. But Ellie remembered a page in the journal. She pulled it out. It read, "They can reach out to your memories. The longer you stay, the more of yourself becomes part of the wall." She looked up at Mark. This house, it's trying to erase us, layer by layer. Suddenly, the mural shimmered, and from the painted shadows, Algernon Pack stepped forward. He was no longer a man. He was something else. Paint for skin, hollow where his eyes should be, and a grin that looked too wide to be human. He spoke with a voice that sounded like hundreds of whispers at once. "Welcome to the gallery. My work is eternal, but even eternity gets lonely. Only one of you may leave. The other must keep the walls alive." Mark screamed and threw the journal at him, but it passed right through. Algernon didn't flinch. Choose. The walls trembled. The floor began to warp. They were running out of time. Ellie turned to Mark. "There has to be another way." He shook his head. "We can't choose. We're not murderers." Then a new voice echoed from behind them. It was a child. A small boy, maybe 6 years old, stepped out from the wall, half-painted, flickering between form and shadow. He whispered, "He took me in 1926. I've been here ever since. You have the brush. You can trap him instead." Ellie froze. "What?" The boy pointed at Algernon. "It only works if he believes he's not the target. He needs your trust to survive." Mark looked at the brush, then at Algernon, who now seemed unsure. Ellie whispered, "What if we fake the choice?" They nodded. It was time. Ellie stepped forward, lifting the brush. She turned to Mark with tears in her eyes and said, "I'm sorry." She reached for his face. Algernon leaned in, grinning, ready for his meal. But Ellie spun the brush in a flash and jammed it straight into Algernon's painted chest. He screamed, a sound like shattering glass mixed with 1,000 screams underwater. The mural began to burn. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips. The faces twisted, and one by one began to vanish. Ellie collapsed as light poured from the ceiling. Mark pulled her to her feet. The chamber trembled. "We have to run, now!" They ran through the collapsing hallway. The wallpaper ripped itself from the walls, lashing like vines. One final face appeared on the wall. Algernon, screaming in reverse, being pulled into the void he had once controlled. And then, silence. The front door unlocked with a soft click. They stepped into the dawn light. The house looked smaller. Dead. Hollow. The wallpaper? Gone. Only bare, cracked walls now. They never spoke of what happened. The journal was buried. The house was sold to the city and condemned. But late at night, Ellie still hears the faint sound of a brush on canvas, painting something just beyond the wall. 2 weeks had passed. Mark and Ellie never returned to Everwood Place. The house was boarded up, condemned, and scheduled for demolition. But neither of them could sleep soundly, because even far away, even in the clean walls of their tiny apartment across town, something still followed. Ellie first noticed it in the bedroom, a soft flutter, like paper moving gently on its own. She thought it was her imagination, but every night at 3:33 a.m., she would wake and feel it again. The walls seemed to breathe. Mark tried to convince her it was just trauma, residual fear, nightmares. But one night he saw it too, the faint outline of a face, pressed from inside the bathroom mirror. They visited a therapist. They avoided wallpaper. They kept every surface in the house bare. Still, it returned. Subtle at first. A peeling corner on a wall they hadn't touched. Then a faint floral pattern, one neither of them remembered choosing, appeared behind the headboard. And one morning, Ellie gasped in the kitchen. "Mark, come look." He did. On the back of the pantry door, drawn into the wood grain, was a face, Algernon Pak, smiling. They called a paranormal investigator. The man laughed at first, until Ellie showed him a photo from the mural. He froze. "I've seen this face before. On a property in Kentucky. Same thing. People went missing. House was destroyed." He pulled a small recorder from his bag, placed it in the living room. They all sat in silence as the tape rolled. Later, when he played it back, at exactly the 33rd second, a whisper. Soft, raspy, so close it made their skin crawl. "Paint. Me. Again." They dug up the journal, buried under 2 feet of dirt in a forest outside town. Ellie flipped to the last page again. But now, the writing had changed. A new line had appeared. Even paint fades, but stories, they bleed forward. Mark threw the book into the fire, watched it burn until it was nothing but ash. They thought it was over. Months passed. Ellie got pregnant. They smiled again. The nightmares faded. But just days before the baby arrived, Mark returned from work one evening and stopped cold at the door. In the nursery, the wall behind the crib, it had wallpapered itself, old, yellow, floral. He rushed to tear it down, but the pattern wouldn't budge. He scratched, clawed, screamed, but it stuck like skin. And in the center, a freshly painted face. This one was different. It was his. Eyes wide, mouth open, painted mid-scream. He ran to find Ellie, but she was already in the living room, standing completely still, staring at the wall. Whispers swirled around her. The air grew cold again. She looked back at Mark with tears in her eyes. He never left Mark. He just waited. The lights flickered. Then everything stopped. A new family moves into a freshly renovated house. The realtor smiles. "We've repainted the entire thing. You'll love it." In a quiet corner of the hallway, a toddler stares at the wall. "Mommy." The man in the wallpaper says hi. The camera pans toward the wall. The floral pattern shifts slightly. And just as the screen fades to black, a single eye opens. Tick.